Now, why would such a small country like Austria come here and present something about industry and the needs of industry on a sample of Austria? That's the title of my presentation. Just as an introduction, ABA, Austrian Business Agency, which I represent, is owned by the Ministry of Economy, Economic Affairs, Science and Research and Development, and we are another inward investment agency. Now, Austria is doing quite well. We are number 2 with regards to GDP per capita within the European community. We are number 2 within spending for research and development within the European community. And in Austria, every working day, 162 new companies are established. Every day, 162 new companies. So there is a real dynamic. Now, having said that, we have looked about what has happened in Austria which has caused this development. And we have looked specifically at industry. And we have identified 5 points which, from a macroeconomic point of view, 5 points which are necessary. First of all, access to right people. Secondly, access to the right innovation. Thirdly, access to the right investments. 4, access to the right markets. And 5, access to startups, because startups are a new vehicle to generate speed. Now, I repeat, I'm talking from a macroeconomic point of view. Austria has had a traditional role between East and West. This is historically based, but also on the most recent development within Austria, that we have attracted many headquarters, international headquarters from the West and from the East. But talking about access to the markets. Now, of course, access to a market from a company has to be bilateral. But from a macroeconomic point of view, something is on a political level. And Austria has defined or decided about 15, 20 years ago that we want to invest in other countries. By now, Austria is a so-called net capital exporter. What does it mean? All the world has invested in Austria altogether 150 billion euro. But the Austrian economy has invested in all of the world 180 billion euro. And all the neighboring countries towards east, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Czechia, Slovakia, Poland, there Austria is number 1 or number 2 investor. Austria is also heavily invested here in Russia. But by investing consequently in markets which are interesting for Austria from a reach point of view, but from a political and economical point of view, we have established for our industry access to those markets. Now, this was happening over a period of 20 years, 25 years. But this is a macroeconomic measure which by now is working. Talking about people. Now, the backbone of the Austrian people for industry are generated by the vocational trainings in the higher technical schools and in the dual education system. But one macroeconomic decision was again taken 15, 20 years ago. Austria has 55 universities for 8 million people. 55 universities, 8 million. This makes every 150,000 people, inhabitants, we have a university. This is much too much for us. We cannot fill it. So what is happening? Young people from all over the world are coming to Austria to study. And by that, we are gaining talents and young people, and some of them are staying in Austria. Some of them are going back in the country. But this, again, is a macroeconomic decision which is now working. Austria is growing, by the way, in terms of population. And I'm not referring to fugitives. This is a very painful story. No, I'm referring to migration. Austria 10 years ago was around 7.2 million people. Now we are 8.6 million people. So people are coming to Austria to stay and work. And the largest group of people staying and working in Austria are the Germans. So it's, there must be a reason behind. The access to innovation. The overall growth on spending on research and development within the European community in the last 15 years was 12%. The overall growth in spending for research and development in Austria for spending was 62%. Over the last 15 years, we have constantly increased spending on research and development. And by now, we are number 2 within the European community. And next year or the year after, most probably we will be number 1 because we are continuing to spend in research and development. Now, what would that be? Now, it's 3.14% of GDP, but what would be that in actual figures? Last year it was 11 billion euro which have been spent in R&D. 11 billion, 1/3 coming from government, 1/3 coming from Austrian companies, and 1/3 coming from outside Austria, from international companies investing in Austria. And this is one of the strengths, R&D activities in Austria. From all over the world, people are coming to invest. Again, this was a macroeconomic decision. Whenever government is spending money, you need a comprehensive funding system. You need a system which is clearly under control, where clearly the conditions and the ways of the money are defined. This is available. This structure was developed again 20 years ago, and there are 3 agencies which are handling that. 1 agency for applied research, 1 agency for basic research, and 1 agency controlling the money. One statement to startup. Now I wish I would have this slide because it's very it's colorful, but 4 years ago the Austrians have decided that we want to be one of the key locations for startups. Government, a one-sided discussion and decision. Some vehicles were set up, some agencies, some programs, some money, of course, was put in place. But now, after 4 years, the place is full with private investors, with private accelerators, and with private institutions, with private office providers and money providers. And suddenly, this has turned into a very active role. And Vienna by now is one, it's not the, but it's one of the major hotspots for startups. And this is another strategic macroeconomic decision which has worked. I think this would summarize my presentation by now. And if you have any questions, please get in contact with me. I could talk about this subject about 1 day. I think I had now 10 or 12 minutes, But I can talk also about some of the fathers or some of the vehicles of these dynamic developments, namely the competence centers. I'm a fan of those. And in any case, if any point what I presented here is of interest, I'm grateful, and thank you for your attention.